initially what the state needs to do is fundamentally change its direction as well. See, a state which in 1974 decided that it will have the right to judge on who is a Muslim or not, or technically that it can decide who is a follower of a particular religion or not, I think that in itself feeds into extremism and radicalism. That has to change. The other is that the ability to form a consensus. Look, let's think about, for instance, Allama Iqbal. Now, Allama Iqbal, his view was based on building a consensus within the community. And, when they refer to ijtihad, ijtihad, the concept generally in the minds of common people, it's about a few clerics getting together and thinking about it. Now, what Allama Iqbal meant was that a community, not the clerics, but the community getting together, thinking about it. Naturally, when he meant community, it meant the elite, not just the religious elite, the political elite, the social elite, but basically interpreting the Shariah, which is in itself man-made, based on interpretation of the holy text. So interpretation of Shariah itself is not just a matter of few clerics to decide. I think as we modernize, as we go further, the Muslim and the world, we have to find ways of how far we can change a traditional interpretation and modernize our thinking. That's what we need to do. And so, the biggest challenge in creating a new narrative is for people to think how we can encourage people to move on and encourage them to think that interpretation that they had heard for years may not be the only one, and that we can expand our circumference. I think first of all it should encourage control. Control means people should be allowed, they should be discouraged from interpreting religion according to their own needs or their way of thinking. That's one. The second is have a dialogue between different schools of thought. I think they should they should use media, look at smaller issues, pick up smaller issues, and, for example, what are the different interpretations according to different schools of thought, and what are the adjustments that can be made. It's very important, issue by issue. Yeah, see, it's not just social, it's political as well. What about rights of people? If you look at what the jihadi literature is saying, jihadi literature is now increasingly talking about corruption. It's talking about corruption of the elite, about the political leadership. Now, this is something to which the common mind is becoming sensitive. We know everybody is talking about corruption, right? So what about a formula for justice, about equitable distribution of resources? Unless the state is eager to give. You see, historically, Pakistan since 1947 has had no socialist, no political agenda which reaches out to the common man. So the common man has increasingly turned towards religion, and in the process has been captured by militant and radical elements. Now, to change that, you have to have a different political and social formula. Well, it's a big challenge if you want to control or change radicalism, if you want to de-radicalize. Now, let me clear one thing. I don't think it's just the social media the militant or the extremist has many methods of attacking people's minds, right? Because what they do, if you look at what they're doing post Zarb-e Azab, they're not talking about killing people. They are actually using a message which actually the state would have little problem with. For instance, if you start talking about Kashmir, if you talk about jihad, if you talk about Islam, if you talk about injunctions of Islam, now how can anyone object to it? It's just that they twist it to their advantage. Now, the very fact that they are present there, for example, Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jamaat-ud-Dawa, Falah Insaniyat Foundation, Jaish-e-Mohammed has actually gone a little undercover. They are published, but again, for example, if somebody is quoted a long verse and written a story about jihad, how can anyone object to it? Right? So there's constantly, a play or replay of their message in different ways. They publish, they have their own print media, and then they also have people in the mainstream media who are of their point of view.
Yes.
That's another problem. And the militant media, in fact, is in many ways, it gets pushed up. It gets supported by the mainstream media. So when you get same kind of messaging, it confuses people. The problem is that the state has, for years, used these militants as a backup, backup for their own military adventures. So these are assets of the state. And the point is that if you do not have the change in policy, then some of them will always be assets of the state. Now, if you continue to use assets of the state, the threat will remain. See, today I'm a bad asset. If I'm a bad asset, then tomorrow I'm going to, if I am very conscious, because we're assuming that these extremists are not logical. They are super logical. They're super rational. So when they'll see that the smart ones will look at it, they'll see, all right, where is the threat? How can I diffuse the threat? Personal threat. Why not leave the country? Why not leave the territory? Or join someone who is legalized by the state, in the eyes of the state. So that's what happens. So they tend to go underground. Except so, for example, before Zarb-e Azab started or before December 2014, there was so much radicalism that was visible to the naked eye. Suddenly it's all disappeared. Now, are you trying to tell me that these people have converted overnight? I don't think so.
Yes.
So there is no research, there is very little capacity to dig out what's happening, and there is no formula for deradicalization. If you're talking about social media, for instance, social media is being used largely by those people who are slightly educated, who can run or operate social media. They're aware of the messaging. Now the problem is not making them aware that this is being done. I think it's making them aware that this is a bad formula.
Yes.
So this messaging has to be separated from from religion. See, this society is not a society of atheists. This is a society of believers. Somebody may not like it, but the thing is that we have to work with this understanding that this is a society of believers. How do you separate this messaging, which is done in the garb of religion, from religion itself? And to tell people that what is happening here is basically they're playing with their minds rather than offering them what is actually condoned by religion. You see, for instance, historically, Muslim societies have so emphasized politically on absence of chaos. I mean, if you look at the entire, historically, the political philosophy through ages, Muslim societies have aimed at having stability, peace and stability. And many philosophers, you take Ghazali, many others, have emphasized the importance of stability to the degree that they've said that if you have a bad ruler, right, then yes, protest, but do not engage in violence, right? Try to use methods, legitimate methods to get rid of the ruler instead of creating chaos. What is happening here in the form of militancy is something new, right? So people have to be explained that the message that is offered to them, and explained to them as order of God, actually needs to be looked at much more rationally, and there are many ways of looking at it.